this, especially for the Senate at this time assembled, that you would be pleased to direct and prosper all our counsels to the advancement of your glory, to the good of your church, and the safety and honor and welfare of your people. All this we ask in the name of Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. The Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive them that trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. And may the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, the love of God, and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with us all now and forevermore. Amen.
Make sure I get it back though. Pedro.
Messages from Her Excellency the Governor General. Announcements by Your Honor the President.
I'm to advise that I've heard from several senators who will not be able to join us today. Senator Moore is traveling to attend a family funeral. Senator Nurse is away in Trinidad on parliamentary business. Senator Grant is traveling on Caribbean Travel Market, to the Caribbean Travel Market in Bahamas this year. And I've also heard from Senator Tate, who is off island. I'm to announce too that we will have later to defer the minutes of the 23rd of December, but the minutes of Wednesday, 11th of December are available, and we can confirm them later. I think we've dealt with all the people, Moore, Nurse, Grant.
Mr. President, I move that the minutes of the 23rd be approved, confirmed. There are two? Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry, Mr. President. I move that the minutes of the 11th be confirmed and the minutes of the 23rd be deferred.
I'll deal with them one by one. The question is that the minutes of Wednesday, 11th of December 2019 be confirmed. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. The further question is that the minutes of the 23rd of December last be deferred. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. And the minutes of 23rd December last are now deferred.
Presentation of petitions, presentation of papers.
Just let me acknowledge this. Before we get on to our business, I'm happy to recognize that in the visitors gallery we have parliamentarians from Canada who are visiting, and we hope to have lunch with them later and to share their company throughout the day and particularly late in the afternoon. Welcome.
Papers. You want to lay paper? The papers in there.
Presentation of papers.
Same thing.
We'll probably
Mr. President, I'm commanded to lay the following document: the Sanitation Service Authority Fee Amendment Regulations 2019.
Reports from select committees. Questions to ministers. Requests for leave to move the adjournment of the Senate on matters of urgent public importance. Statements by ministers or parliamentary secretaries. Personal explanations. Motions relating to the business or sittings of the Senate and moved by a minister.
Mr. President, I'd like to move the suspension of 45-2. Standing order 45-2 for the remainder of the day. Today's sitting.
The question is that standing order 45-2 be suspended for the balance of today's sitting. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
Introduction of bills.
Any bills to be introduced to be read the first time? Any bills to be read the first time you see 'em?
Mr. President, I beg to move the first reading of the offenses against, the first reading of the Constitution Amendment Bill 2019.
Public business, sir. Order number 1, in the name of the Honorable Acting Leader of the Senate, to move the second reading of the Offenses Against a Person Amendment Bill 2019.
Mr. President, this bill, which is the offense against the persons amendment bill 2019. Yeah, sorry. Y'all can hear me? Yeah? So this bill, the offense against the persons amendment bill 2019, is a piece of legislation that would have come about because of some adjustments that would have needed to have been made. As you know, Mr. President, there was previous legislation that came before this body where the mandatory death penalty was seen to be unconstitutional, and we made amendments to that bill and a new act where it gave judges discretionary powers in able to decide whether someone gets the death penalty or any other sentence that they thought to be applicable. Now, although this had occurred, we would remember that there would have been people who would have been previously been sentenced under previous legislation where the death penalty was mandatory. And those people would now be in a situation where they were not given the same discretionary courtesies as those that now face that identical offense. Coming out of that, Mr. President, we know this has had a long history, and this all came about due to fundamental protection of fundamental rights and freedoms of individuals. And so the same way in which we would consider those fundamental rights and freedoms of individuals in the current instance of sentencing, one would have to then look at those who are currently facing the death penalty under mandatory sentencing and clearly ensure that those people are given the identical rights as anyone else. So this bill is really a simple bill, a simple matter that we're here to ask everyone to take a look at and to understand and agree that it needs to be done, where those people would now need to be able to be given the ability to now be able to have their sentences reviewed. I'm talking about the mandatory death penalties that they would have received, and now they would face judges again and have a different sentence, maybe the same sentence, I can't say, but certainly the ability to have an alternative sentence in all of these instances. So as you can see from the actual legislation itself, it's clearly articulated here what it's all about, and it shows that this would help in tidying up this type of anomaly, so to speak, that would exist if we were not to move to this particular position. Now, I know anytime you speak about death penalty and death penalty issues, sometimes people get a little nervous. Certainly, when you look at the crime situations currently, crime situations in other countries, I mean, the world has changed, and Barbados is certainly affected by a change in world. We are not in isolation from the rest of the world, and so therefore we do have some of the same issues that any developing country would have when it comes to crimes that we would not normally have seen in the numbers that we see today. But this does not preclude someone's basic right, basic rights under your basic human rights. And so taking that into account, we would not want to not let emotion play a part in this and look at it purely as what an individual is entitled to and what the law should prescribe for those individuals. So there's no suggestion that anyone is being discriminated against simply because they may have come at a different time. Now, we all know that we have reached this position because it had already been declared that mandatory death sentencing is unconstitutional. And so all of those people who would have been sentenced to death under a mandatory sentence, I need say no more. So I'm hoping that all of my colleagues here will understand that this is not an emotive issue. It is merely a legal issue, and one where we need to be in compliance with protecting and ensuring that a person's fundamental rights and fundamental freedoms are not violated. And we do not abrogate the most basic right someone has, which is the right of fairness in law. And this is all that this bill is attempting to do. So, Mr. President, I am saying here that the offense against the Person Amendment Bill 2019, this legislation is certainly in keeping with what we have done in this chamber here recently, and it's just a continuing of that and a continuing of ensuring that all the laws governing a person's right to fairness, certainly within the judicial system, is adhered to. And so I'm asking, Mr. President, that everyone look at it in this light and that they support this offense against the Persons Amendment Bill 2019 as it stands here and as it exists, to ensure that all people within our current penal system are treated in the same manner as anyone else coming to face that identical offense within our system. And with those very few words, Mr. President, I beg to move that this bill be read a second time.
Thank you, Senator Boyce.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I will start with a personal wish for us all in this chamber to have a healthy, prosperous, and hopefully less contentious New Year's. Mr. President, the legislation brought before the House today is one which, as set out by Senator Moore, seeks to rectify and bring in line the Offenses Against the Persons Act to reflect the changes previously made in the Constitution quite recently. And I think, sir, that we all have accepted, well, certainly there's no choice in the matter, but we all have accepted the ruling of the Caribbean Court of Justice in this matter, which brings us in line with the majority of the international community. And we have done away with the mandatory death sentence for the case of murder, and we now have the discretion within the judiciary and whatever other safeguards we have been able to preserve. So what, as set out by Senator Moore, we're dealing with today, sir, is to ensure that those persons who were previously sentenced have the opportunity to return, to have their matters not reheard, but the sentence reviewed, with the court having the benefit of the legislation which empowers the judge to consider another number of factors in determining an appropriate sentence. And what was not pointed out by my colleague, Senator Moore, is that there is one restriction in that it's expressly provided that when the reconsideration is done, death will not be considered as a penalty. Now, I assume this stems from the fact that previously the sentence of death would have been unconstitutional. So therefore, if you're resentencing, you can't put yourself in that double, dare I say, jeopardous position. That was deliberate, okay? Now, what it does lead to, though, Mr. President, is that when we rise to have this discourse at this time, I think it's fair to recognize that as Barbadians, we are all understandably concerned with the current crime situation, especially the gun violence that is rearing its head. And you've heard me make statements in this chamber, sir, about the civic compromise which constitutes the Barbados that we existing, sir. And this compromise meant that while on occasions there would be cause, and there are a number of socioeconomic factors which we are constantly reminded of, as Barbadians, the situation is becoming increasingly untenable. And I believe it's fair to say that the public will support the government in whatever initiative the government believes necessary to wrestle the situation to the ground. That being said, I do recognize the hypocrisy of the position, sir, that when we have situations like Sheraton and St. Albans, that they become the topic of national discourse, but the fact is we've had certain communities in this island which have had to deal with this for a number of years. And there was no noise. There was no noise. But as we all begin to feel it, and more recently, sir, one of our own members, one of our beloved members, was face to face with a situation which even his normal sunny disposition was impacted, sir. So the point of the matter, what I'm getting to, sir, is that the government has the public behind it, and during this period should use the initiative while you have this level of public support to take the necessary steps. Now, we recognize, and it's an age-old debate, how far do we go in the preservation of the society? What rights are we prepared to see eroded to provide security? It's a heavy burden which the government has to bear, and we do sympathize with the position of the Attorney General. It's a rough position to be in. But I feel confident, sir, that the appropriate steps will hopefully be taken sooner rather than later. As someone told me recently, we all know the answer, but the question is the solution. And sometimes you have the answer, but when you have to show the work in, it's a bit dubious. But we can't be debating this legislation, sir, without recognizing and certainly not seeking to appeal to any form of outcry or knee-jerk reaction. We do recognize the issue of cause and effect. So while we have this debate, Mr. President, the legislation which I am in support of, I think I would like to urge the government to do what they have to do, recognize the public's concern about the situation, and take the necessary steps in the most appropriate manner to see that the situation is resolved. That's my contribution, Mr. President.
Thank you. I think you. Any other honorable senator wishing to speak? Senator Franklin, happy to recognize you, sir.
Yes, thank you very much, sir. I won't be long. Promise you today I won't be long. I have already spoken on the issue of the courts legislating for us. The Caribbean Court of Justice has determined that the mandatory death penalty was unconstitutional. I doubt very much that it was, but it is now because they said so. They're the highest court. Sir, we must be careful with judges substituting their own opinion for what the law is supposed to be. We've had it before in Pratt and Morgan and the former place, the Privy Council, when they decided that if a person is sentenced to death and the sentence has not been carried out for 5 years, then you have to commute. That was never the law of Barbados. That is what the judges made up. Judges are not elected to make law. Mind you, I am not sorry that the mandatory death penalty is gone, because I am always wary of the fact that a person could be sentenced to death and executed, and then find sometime down the road that it wasn't him or her, as the case may be. So I am very wary of that, and we've seen several instances in other countries where people were in jail for lots of years and then turned out they were innocent. And I would not want that to happen in Barbados. So my personal opinion is that I prefer to err on the side of caution and allow people to spend the rest of their natural lives in prison or something like that, in case if you make a mistake, because people do, and people tell lies on you. You know, I remember people telling lies for me once, and just once. I was at school then, and I'm always then wary of witnesses. You know, this guy used to beat everybody in the class except me. But one day he was beating this fellow, and I intervened, and I put some lashes on him, you know. And we were taking out the headmaster, and I pleaded that he troubled me first. Everybody else in the class came along and said so. It wasn't true, but the witnesses said so. And from that day, I was in third form. From then till now, I'm always wary of witnesses. I didn't ask them to say anything for me, you know, because it was done in the headmaster's office. But that fellow was a bully, and everybody wanted him beaten. And I always remember that. I said third form, 3C. So from then till now, so we can have people being sentenced to death because people conspire to lie on them. So I rather err on the side of caution. Even though, sir, as the senator mentioned, my own ordeal, that has not changed my position on the death penalty. At that point in time, you know, I was a bit angry, disturbed, whatever you have it, and more concerned that my wife might lose a damn good husband than anything else. But it has not made me angry enough to want to retain the death penalty. No, she agrees. You know, so, sir, but my caution is that is something that this Parliament should have deliberated on, and if they don't want to, go referendum if they want for the people, but certainly not from the courts. Mind you, we got to a position that they like, but I didn't like the road how we got there. The courts are legislating, and we have to be careful of that. That is all I want to say today in this debate. Yes, the outcome is my preferred outcome, but the road to get there is not the preferred road that I would like to take. You know? The people in the other place were elected, we were selected to pass laws. The court passed this one. So and I have to sound a word of caution. I don't like it. Thank you so much, sir.
Any other honorable senator would like to contribute to the matter before us? I'm afraid the speakers are at an end.
Sprayer,
You need to wrap up.
sprayer, sprayer.
You want to?
5 minutes.
Senator Sprayer?
Thank you, Mr. President, for the opportunity to speak. I certainly cannot speak to this amendment with the eloquence of the lawyer on the other side of the table, but I can speak to the overall transformation of the legal or judicial system in Barbados. Mr. President, as alluded to by the acting leader of government business, the world is changing. Barbados is changing. We are seeing things in this country that we never imagined that we will see. A culture has taken root in this country that, even though if we really dig deep, we can perhaps find the origins of this new culture. The fact still remains that we could have never imagined, perhaps 10, 12 years ago, that we will find ourselves here in this position. And for that reason, Mr. President, this government has, in its judgment, seen it fit to continue to improve our judicial system. And this amendment is just one step in that direction. And I'm glad that our Canadian visitors are here, because I'm sure that they are probably going through the same transformations within their judicial system. They are celebrating 153 years of Confederation, and certainly another 38 years or so of their freedom, charter of the rights and freedoms. So they're going through the same process because they endure the same problems that we see here: delays, judges not having the discretion to impose sentences that they deem as fair. And it's some of the things existed in this country where if a person was charged with murder, the death sentence was mandatory. There was no scope for any kind of mitigation as long as it was murder. But we have changed that. But in the course of changing that, there were a number of persons, they languishing on death row, who would have been impacted by the recent change in the legislation. I don't think it's fair. It's fair that we make amendments so those persons could then benefit from this, from having a second look, a re-examination of the evidence, of the circumstances that brought them to the point where they are in jail sitting today, and give them the opportunity to have their sentences commuted, or to at least have a second look, to ensure they enjoy the same freedoms, the same rights as every other Barbadian now going forward who commits a similar offense would enjoy. And I don't see it as a contentious piece of legislation. I'm glad that the voices I heard on the other side of the table and on the other side from the opposition are voices that more or less support this piece of legislation, because they see what we are trying to do here. We understand that we are dealing within a context where persons are committing more heinous crimes, more brazen crimes, but at the same time, we still have to protect the rights of those persons. And I think this piece of legislation is basically doing that. And I am pretty much in full support of this legislation because I see what it's trying to do. And I can see along the line that there are a number of things in this country that we have to fix, but it's going to take small steps like this one to fix those problems. And they're not easy fixes. Because if they were easy fixes, the number of countries that would have set out on this journey, because I think a lot of the transformation that's occurring happened in the last 18 months or so. But there were other jurisdictions that would have started years ago, who would have had perhaps a more progressive government throughout in the last 10 years or so, who would have seen the importance of this piece of legislation, as opposed to the one that we would have had to endure here in the last 10 years or so, that for some reason never saw the importance of important legislation, transformational legislation. But as I said, it's a step in the right direction. It's going to take a number of small steps like this. It's not going to be easy, but it's necessary. And whether where we sit now was different from where we stood then, or vice versa, the fact remains that times have changed. Things in Barbados are changing, and there's a need to move with the times and ensure that not only are the lives and the security of Barbadians safeguarded, but those persons who would have run afoul of the law in the past, that their rights and their freedoms too are also safeguarded. And with those few words, Mr. President, I just want to fully associate myself with this piece of legislation and the sentiments of my colleagues on both sides, and I'm obliged. Thank you.
Next recognized Senator Greenwich.
Mr. President, I only rise to make. Got good taste. I have good taste. Always have good taste. She has good taste. Mr. President, I just want to just add one sentence to what has been said so far. And I would hope that this amendment, it is not seen as any softening of our position on the question of murder. Because I do not think that any Barbadian, right-thinking Barbadian, I should say, would ever think that this country will be so mad as to change its position of intolerance where murder is concerned. I believe, sir, that there's no doubt in our minds whatsoever. I used to even say so as a little boy, that I do believe that because of the mandatory, what do I mean? Just saying that you must die for murder, the mandatory sentence which had to be made, that there's no doubt that some innocent persons at some time, not only overseas, I've heard the stories overseas, 12 million people who went to their grave being innocent of a murder. Something was pinned on them. I do believe that innocently, it might have happened here in Barbados too. And the mandatory death penalty is something which has troubled me from time to time. And we have had it here even when the crime was not a heinous crime. Just 3 seconds of irrational behavior for your whole life. And that is what happened. You met your death. I remember, sir, a murder in the north where you had an old lady, she was murdered by a young gentleman. And this gentleman went and called his best friend and dragged this already murdered woman in a hole. It put her in a grave and covered her. The man who dragged her, the accessory to that, also met the death penalty. Just for that. And if we rationalize it, we would say he didn't commit a murder. But you can see, even when it is not that heinous crime that a person has committed, the person met the death. And I believe that this gives us a little break, at least a break, from sentences of that type. Sir, as most persons have said in the discussion so far, we are indeed living in a changing world. And as Senator Springer just said, we must change with the times. And there are things which are being thrust on us as we try to get in line, which perhaps we never countenanced when we were teenagers. The whole question of getting bail for murder is something which troubled me too. And I remember when the former Prime Minister first heard it, he said he had never heard about it. He didn't even know that it could happen. And sir, I won't go as far as to say I didn't know it would happen, but it took me by surprise too. And it is something which is happening fairly often. Well, I shouldn't say fairly, but it has happened on quite a few occasions already. Has happened quite recently, where someone actually got bail for murder. One of the, and perhaps the last point I make before you take my seat, the whole question of Senator Franklin says he does not think that the judges should make law. But, sir, that is why they are there. They make law on that. They make law on that bench. Denin, he has made at least 5 dissenting decisions. I mean, the other judges were saying, I am going left, left, left. And then among the judges, so there's 3 judges, and he said, not me and them. I ain't going with them. This is what I feel. And Denin said, right, right, right. You know what is the law now? Right, right, right. Because it was Denin's view. Lord Denin, I should say. I shouldn't say Denin, but Lord Denin's view. That what was being said here, and there are about, as I said, about 5, 6 instances when he did it. Yes, yes, yes. Yes. I wouldn't try to go in any case law and so on, but the judges, they make the case law. They make the case law. And if the CCJ says it is unconstitutional, it is unconstitutional. I don't see why we should be coming back and saying those people who don't know what they're doing, those judges have said so and we are following them. If the courts do not do it, who do we expect to do it? Parliament does not make the case law.
That is not common law.
Anyhow, I wouldn't go into any argument with law about Senator Franklin. But Mr. President, I just rose to agree with most of what the other senators have said, that we are living in a changing world, and perhaps we've seen from time to time a few things happening in that area of offenses against the person. I don't know what's on my mind this morning. But I fully support the amendment, sir.
Mr. President, I rise again to thank all of the senators who have contributed this morning to debate on this bill. Just to say, Mr. President, that as I said in my opening comments, the death penalty is always an emotive issue. And as this debate today is, although a death penalty issue in terms of an amendment to a piece of legislation, it is not really a debate as to whether the death penalty, one is for it or against it. Though, of course, one has a right to, Mr. President, give one's opinion on any issue. But this is certainly just an issue where, as I articulated earlier, to safeguard the rights of individuals, because any individual charged or convicted of an offense is given certain rights under our laws and certain rights under our Constitution. Now, the CCJ is the final court of appeal for Barbados. We all know how our court system works: Magistrates Court, the High Court, the Court of Appeal, and of course, the Caribbean Court of Justice. It has been determined that the legislation of mandatory death sentencing was unconstitutional. And so we, as a country of laws, and as a country who follows laws, and we have that reputation worldwide as being a sound jurisdiction when it comes to legal matters and adjudication of such. And so certainly in this instance, we would continue to do what we know is right for the citizens of this country, or any individual that is in this country facing any type of legal situation that might result in any type of sentencing because of a conviction. And we'd want our system to remain as sound as it can be. So it's not so much as to what our own individual opinions are with regard to the death penalty issue itself, is whether or not this law, this amendment to this piece of legislation, Mr. President, is what would keep us in compliance with what is sound law and sound best practices for safeguarding the rights of individuals. And so that is why we're here today. Now, my colleague Senator Boyce, did say that there was one proviso within this, and that was that there would be no sentence of death. And he's correct. It is here. I won't bother to read it, because I know all senators present have a copy of it, and that is correct. And I think Senator Boyce, as an attorney, would understand why we would not be able to do such. But, you know, I've been around long enough to see, as I said when I first got up to speak, Mr. President, the changes in our society. Barbados is a changing society like everywhere else. There were years ago, Barbadians could be in their homes, windows open, no one had burglar bars, alarm systems was something as foreign to us as baseball. But that is no longer the case. You know, I always say when I speak that technology has brought the world to us and us to the world in some instances. And we get the good and the bad of any society where there's a level of development that allows one to then be able to interact with many other countries, people from all over the world, and we get a chance to go all over the world ourselves. So it changes your society, some good, some bad. Now, yes, I do agree like anyone else. Some of the crimes that we see today may not be crimes that we've seen 20 years ago, but that is true in other countries as well, not just here. And we recognize that, but it does not yet still abrogate one's right to be treated fairly within a judicial system. And that is what this piece of legislation intends to do. So I just want to make that point, and make it clearly that this is not an issue as to someone changing the right to have the death penalty used as a sentence within our court system. It doesn't seek to do that at all. It just seeks to bring these individuals who would have faced a mandatory sentence some years ago in line with what would obtain to any individual in their situation today. And so, Mr. President, with those few words and explanation as to what this legislation is really all about, I beg to move that this bill be read a second time.
Question is that the bill under consideration be now read a second time. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it.
President, I beg to move that Your Honor now leave the chair and the Senate resolve itself into committee for further consideration of this bill.
And the Senate resolve itself into committee of the whole Senate for the further consideration of the bill in detail. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. We are now in committee.
The Senate is now in committee.
Clause 1.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to beg to move an amendment to Clause 1, that the act be cited as the offense against the Person Amendment Act 2020 instead of 2019.
This is in the short title.
Yes, Mr. President. Mr. Chairman.
Members will note that the short title of the act says Offenses Against the Person Amendment Act 2019. There's now been a motion to amend it to 2020. Any objections? Those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
That's clause
Clause 1.
1. The question is that clause 1 as amended stand part. Honorable members in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 2.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Clause 2 stand part.
The question is that clause 2 stand part. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it. Report.
Mr. President, I beg to move that
You do no report.
you now report to His Honor the President the passing of one bill in committee
With amendment.
with amendment. Sorry.
The question is that I do now report to His Honor the President the passing of one bill with amendment. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
The chairman has reported to me the passage of the amended bill under consideration in committee.
Mr. President, I beg to move that this bill now pass and be cited.
Third.
Oh, the third. Beg to move a third reading of this bill.
The question is that the bill under consideration be now read a third time. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
I beg to move that this bill do now pass and be cited as the Offenses Against the Persons Amendment Act 2020.
Question is that the bill do now pass and be cited as the Amendment Against the Persons Act 2020. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. I think the ayes have it. Atmosphere prevailing in the air, no people in the dark. Yeah, we will be able to we're not back in earnest. We have to warm back up.
Do lunch. Do lunch. Lunch.
Mr. President, I would like to beg to move that this sitting be suspended until 2:10 for lunch.
Sitting be now suspended until 10 minutes past 2, and that in the meanwhile we go to the lunchroom and enjoy our lunch. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it, and we are now at lunch.